Good morning. We're welcoming you to the home of Unitarian Universalism in Central Washington. My name is Rhonnie Craven, and I serve on the Little Free Pantry team and the worship team, and I'll be your celebrant this morning. If you are a visitor this morning, we are very glad that you are here. We welcome every person of goodwill, just as you are. Whatever body you inhabit, whomever you love, whatever your age, you are welcome here. If you would like to receive our newsletter and other announcements, you can fill out the connection cards that are in the pockets in front of you where the hymnals are, and drop them in the basket at the entryway after the service. We invite everyone to join us for coffee, treats, and conversation after the service, both in person and on Zoom. For the folks on Zoom, you'll find the order of service in the chat. Now, will you please take a moment and turn around and greet all of our fellowship on Zoom? Hi. And now you can take a moment. And now, greeting. I know. Rowdy crowd. All right, you guys knew right what to do. Greeting all your neighbors. Thank you. Okay. So our fellowship is located on the ancestral home of the Pasquosa. For thousands of years, the Pasquosa have been stewards of this land, fishing, hunting, gathering roots and berries, and practicing cultural traditions. The Pasquosas still live here. We acknowledge that their land has been taken over because the U.S. government broke treaty obligations and carelessly allowed uninvited white colonizers to settle here. We stand aside our indigenous neighbors as they continue their traditions and seek to have their rights recognized. We acknowledge our shared responsibility to sustain right relations with each other and the land. For more on this subject, please visit our website, cascadeuu.org, under the Justice tab. And now let's rise in body or spirit and sing our opening song, O Come, Emmanuel, number 225 in your hymnal.
We gather in worship. The word in that song, Emmanuel, means the holy within, dwelling within. Please be seated. We gather today with a sacred intention. The intention, the desire, the declaration is that justice be our living and our prayer. We affirm in covenant with the beloved community that justice is real, is possible. Though it is not here fully, not fully yet, the seeds have been planted time and time again. The beginnings have been nurtured. And we remember all those who went before us and lived to make the dream of beloved community a reality on earth. So justice is our prayer. May our time of worship together continue to water the beginning trees of our diverse interdependence. May our time of worship give air and nourishment to all spirits that need to grow and thrive, and to know equity and inclusion as a way of being essential for all of us. Working for justice is our prayer. We affirm in covenant with each other the beloved community, the community that is growing, that can fill the world, and this spirit, in this dream, in this reality of the true and just community, we gather to worship together.
This is the time in our service when we light a sacred flame. If you are joining remotely, please feel free to light your own chalice as well. We join Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists all over the world in lighting our chalice this morning. As we light our chalice, please follow along with the words that are printed in your bulletin or on the screen. We light this flame to ignite the sacred power of justice. We light this flame so that it may be a beacon of hope. In moments of uncertainty, fear, anxiety, and the unknown, we light this flame and are inspired by its bright blaze.
Is my microphone working? Yeah. That'll work? There we go. Dolores Huerta. You should know her name. Powerful woman, a woman of great transformation in the 20th century, still alive, late in her life, still filled with vibrant energy. Dolores Huerta lived in a hotel as a child, a hotel that her mother owned. This was back in the early 20th century when many people came from Mexico to work in the United States, on farms in California, and even up into orchards in Washington state. They were not paid well, they were sometimes treated poorly, sometimes established new lives in a new land. There's a story about her. It's not exactly true, but it's inspired by all that she did, all the life of Senora Huerta. Today our normal child care person is not here today, but Rita Salama has agreed to take children. So if the children would like to go to the back room and do some arts and crafts, you can. You can stay and listen to what we have to say if you like, or you can go back with Rita. Would people like to form a little tunnel here, and then Rita will go. Go with each other to find. I didn't see, is Betsy Pierce here? There's Betsy. Hi, Betsy. Betsy Pierce represents the our care team, people who help us organize and be more effective in our caring ministry for one another, creation of community, sharing of generosity and kindness and love between one another. And she represents the community today, and if you have any needs in the community that I think she should be aware of, please reach out to her. But we've set aside this time in the service to share our events and the experiences that we've had that mean something to us. Events of great sorrow or events of great hope, and things that have moved us in a positive direction spiritually. It's a time of sharing and honoring. I will take a flame down here. Each of you are invited to come forward, or a few of you come forward, light a candle, say your name first, light a candle, and then share your joy, your sorrow, your hope, or your need. We are in the season of Advent. Advent is one of the many festivals of life that mark the fading of the year, especially in the northern hemisphere, and mark the beginning of a new year. as the earth moves through the solstice on its tilted orbit around the sun. The name Advent comes from a Latin word, adventus, which means coming or arrival. In the Christian calendar, Advent refers to three different forms of coming or arrival. First, it's Jesus arriving in a physical birthday in Bethlehem. Second is the arrival of the Christ Spirit, the salvific Spirit, in the heart and mind and heart of the believer, Christian believer. And three, in the ultimate arrival of the eschaton, coming but not quite here yet. Theologies vary as to exactly what each of these three means and how they're related to each other and exactly what's being celebrated. And as Unitarian Universalists, we focus on justice, on an image of a beloved community that is coming, that was announced, that will arrive someday. You may remember that this year we're using the new statement of UU values, National UU values, to guide the themes of our month. And we're taking one of the 6 values that are on the outside and the central core source value in the center of that diagram over there, going through each of these, guiding our worship. And this month, it's justice. The value we uphold is justice. The statement contains 3 promises. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support using inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregation, in our association, and in society at large. This is justice, the way we describe it now. Justice is something, an ideal, always arriving, often being lost, never complete till the end of time. One of the big problems with the word justice in a religious context is that it's skewed by the often non- or anti-religious use of the word justice, as in the so-called criminal justice system, the system which is primarily about punishing people for crimes and has very little to do with healing or creating wholeness or creating harmony. The Christian image of Jesus is the enunciation of a way of being that creates this harmony and justice. I heard this week when I was reading, I heard something, a little theological reflection that I had never heard before. It surprised me, it made me laugh. It was, if Mary gave birth to Jesus, and Jesus is the Lamb of God, then did Mary have a little lamb? I just have to stick a pun in somewhere in my sermon. It's a sweet little pun. It's not meant in any derogatory sense, right? What we're talking about is harmony and community and what it is that invokes that for us. One key that I have for thinking about justice comes from when I started in seminary. Went to minister school in Denver, Colorado. My wife, our new baby daughter, and I all moved to apartments across the street from IUF School of Theology in Denver, Colorado. And one of our neighbors in that little block of apartments was a Dine, a Navajo woman, and also a Methodist. She's now named Reverend, we called her Tweety Sombrero. That's her name back there, Tweety. She's now known as Reverend Tweety Evelyn Sombrero Navarrete. Works down on the reservation. One thing that she made clear to me then was that her Navajo culture was in no way in conflict with American Christianity. That instead it was the other way around. That the American culture, the capitalistic and Christian culture of this nation, had opposed her people and her way of being for centuries. She made clear to me that the roots of her culture, of her nation's way of being, was the root also of her faith, of her religious faith. She talked about this word that was one of the most important words in the Navajo language, hojo. Hojo invokes the unshakable foundation of all that is good and right. Hojo is loosely translated as peace, or harmony, or balance, or beauty. It's the repeated word that's in a reading in our hymnal, 682, sometimes called the Blessing Way Prayer. Beauty is before me, and beauty behind me. Above me and below me hovers the beautiful. In Navajo, this is hojo, repeated over and over again. I am surrounded by it. I am immersed in it. In my youth, I am aware of it. And in my old age, I shall walk quietly on the beautiful trail. In beauty, it is begun. In beauty, it is ended. An affirmation of the foundation of our life and our moving through our days. And when I hear the word justice, I think of hojo, the ultimate reality within which we not only can live, but must live. And this is what I serve and what I think we are trying to serve. There are similar words in other languages. Across all South Asia, both Hindu and Buddhist cultures, the word dharma. Dharma invokes the natural, or dhamma, invokes the natural order that brings liberation, peace, well-being, wholeness to the human being. In the Hebrew scriptures, the word for justice is tzedek. Tzedek encompasses these concepts of righteousness and fairness, of going beyond just legalistic adherence to rules and commands, and instead embodying some sense of harmony and well-being. In Isaiah, the ancient Jewish prophet Isaiah, chapter 32, enunciates it. The citadel and the watchtower will become a wasteland until the Spirit is poured on us from on high, and the desert becomes a fertile field. And the fertile field seems like a forest. The Lord's justice will dwell in the desert. God's tzedek will live in the fertile field. The fruit of that tzedek, of righteousness, will be peace. Its effect will be quietness and confidence forever, and my people will live in peaceful dwelling places, in secure homes, in undisturbed places of rest. We heard that prayer echoed today in the candle for Syria. Justice, righteousness, care, compassion, living and vibrant in the world, not just protecting our own, but bringing all together. It's not always just meanness or fear or spirit of aggression that causes injustice, though those are always huge in creating war and creating injustice and harming people terribly. In this country, in the United States of America, there was a desire to take over the land and use it. And the people who already lived here and the nations who already lived here were just seen as parts of the land. The great religious doctrine of discovery had given all the invaders and colonizers this permission to use whatever they found because they were the Christian people, that they had the right to own what they discovered, what was new to them. In 1855, we made a treaty. This nation made a treaty with the Pasquosa people, with the Pasquosa branch of the Wenatchee people, called Wenatchee with the Yakima, who all lived in, nobody owned the land. It wasn't like the Pasquosa owned this piece of land and the Yakima weren't welcome there. They all understand that we were all in the land together. And it was the way of living and the language and the way that people lived together that shaped who they were. But they could see the power of the people who were coming. They could see the power of the people who had come. And we're talking about selling the land, and they would say, we don't know how to sell the land, we don't own the land. And the people who wanted to buy the land and used it took advantage of that over and over. In 1855, we made a treaty, proclaimed a reservation known as the Wenatchee Fishery. Thousands of acres given for the life, in perpetuity, for as long as the people should live, as long as the sun should shine, they could fish and they could live on the river. But the train was coming. And there was an agent, L.T. Irwin. He's the villain in the story. L.T. Irwin intentionally moved the Wenatchee Reservation all the way up the river to Lake Wenatchee, where the people could not live. There was no salmon that went up there, or very few. There was no life to be had up there in the winter for the Wenatchee people, but he moved it up there because he saw that it was just going to get in the way of the railroad otherwise. He knew what he was doing. Undermined a treaty that we had made. Of course, no one had ever gotten around to actually surveying the promises of the treaty. They weren't really intent on fulfilling their promises. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe in promises. We make these promises all the time. We know we're going to fall short sometimes. We know we might make mistakes and not get the promise, but we keep the promise, and when we don't keep it, we admit that we've not kept it, and we do something about the mistakes we've made. And then, in the post-Civil War era, Americans, idealistic reformers, turned their attentions to the plight of the Indian people across the continent. At that time, many Americans, due to wars that we had waged against the First Nations' land, regarded the native people with either fear or loathing. But there were some reformers who really believed that with the proper education and the right treatment, the Indians could become just like other American citizens. And they convinced the leaders of Congress that education would change at least some of them into patriotic and productive members of society. It was ultimately called the termination policy, because the desire was to end the existence of these separate tribes and make them just like the Irish or the Italians who had become part of the melting pot of America. And one of the first efforts to accomplish this goal was the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, founded by a guy named Captain Richard Pratt. In 1879, he was leading proponent of assimilation, and he was the one who came up with the phrase, "Kill the Indian and save the man." This application of the doctrine of discovery justified or tolerated all sorts of sin and evil and harm. Sexual, physical abuse of children included in that. Nathan Walker, Commissioner of the Indian Affairs, looking at the state of what was being done, said, "Freedom of expansion is of incalculable value to America, to this nation, to our people. But to the Indian, it is of incalculable cost. It brings to the Indian wretchedness, destitution, and beggary." And then in 1870, President Ulysses S. Grant invited all Protestant denominations to take over the management of American Indian reservations and agencies. Some Catholics had already taken over some of these. And the sense of idealism and discipline and righteousness that they carried into doing that kind of work, Ulysses Grant thought would be great for everyone. And so he encouraged all the Protestants to come in. And there was 3 men in one Ute reservation in Colorado who were Unitarians. And one of them was called Bond. Mr. Bond and his wife had a strong passion for helping the Ute Indians. They wanted to, as Unitarians, were motivated to create community and to care for children and to give education. They saw the power of education. They understood this and were promoting public education in the United States. And they wanted to give education to the Ute Indians. Over here, there was a school that was created on the other side of the mountains. Several other schools were created, boarding schools. It's more efficient, it's more effective to take the children away from their families and to give them an absolute total education, an absolute immersion in English language so they would forget their language. Give them a total immersion in a regimented school culture. It was practically military in the way they had bells where they rang when you wake up now and eat now and go exercise now. And it was a lifestyle that was completely foreign and alien, but the point was to kill the Indian so as to save these children. Our involvement as Unitarians, the goal was to meet the Indians in a humane Christian spirit, saving them from trickery, from robbery, from intemperance and other vices of the frontier life, and to present to them the better phases of a Christian civilization. One Unitarian put it a little bit more harshly. Unitarian Reverend Danforth on the White River Reservation said, "Our goal was to induce them to settle in permanent abodes and assume the habits and dress of civilized life and learn to do some kind of work other than hunting." In 2007, our Unitarian Universalist General Assembly, our delegates called for the association, inspired by a motion made by some of our members, to research our history and uncover our links to complicity with the genocide of the native peoples, with slavery, with all types of racial, ethnic, cultural oppression, past and present. This should be done towards the goal of accountability through acknowledgement, through apology, through repair, through reconciliation. And this is part of the life of this congregation. We have picked up this thread, and we have tried to reach out to the Pasquosa people in particular. It was the President of the United States who created the Colville Reservation, put 12 tribes together on 1,000 acres of land. Originally it was like millions of acres and went down to, I think it's 1.4 million, something like that. 12 different nations of people forced to live together in rather spare realm, with few resources. But they survived, and they have continued. And now is the time for us to engage in the acknowledgement and the apology and the repair and the reconciliation. And reconciliation can only happen in relationship, and it's got to happen in a relationship that's not top down. We're the nice people with a lot of resources who are coming in to educate you. It's got to be, we're just as in trouble as you are, and we're all in this together. We need to see one another, and we need to know one another, and we need to spend time with one another. And this is all levels. In a multicultural society, you have to reach out to all the different kinds of people, and it's complicated, it's difficult. It's easy to create a culture when everyone has the same holidays and the same songs. I was thinking about this when I was watching the play All Is Calm. It's beautiful. We have this great theater productions in this city. It's really amazing. And all these men, older men, representing younger men who were sent off to war in World War I. And there's moments where they're singing songs because they're all stuck in this miserable, wretched trenches in the front lines of the war, and they start singing just to keep their spirits up. And they can hear each other singing. And somehow that singing, that's why we always sing in worship, sing together, creates bonds of unity, bonds of connection. And then Christmas, and they all are Christians. They all know Christmas. And so it becomes a moment, Christmas Eve, a moment to just put down your arms and sing songs. And they eventually, one group or two, Germans and British and Scotsmen and all these different little ethnicities all come together and sing together. It's an image of what we want all human beings to wake up to. And we know there is no single culture that's going to help us do that. We have different languages. different ways of talking about it, different ways of invoking it. There are a million different names, words for the thing that some call God and others call Dharma. But it's one thing, and it's always there. It's a reality, it's a presence, it's a possibility in our lives, and that's what justice means living towards that, leaning into that. One of the interesting things about the attempt within the schools for children, Native Americans, was the attempt to teach them all farming techniques, as if all of them lived in the Midwest, where you could farm fairly profitably. And they were teaching them about plows and cows and horses, and there just weren't the resources or even the capability to engage. It was out of a desire to make people more similar, to find something that they could share, but they weren't paying attention to who they wanted to be in community with. They really didn't understand the differences. And one of the things that happened in the Unitarian school, especially in Bond school, was that the teachers started, because they were Unitarians, a lot of them, they were asking questions of the kids like, so what's your word for this kind of food? Or how would you talk about this? They asked them, so what are your usual holidays? They were failing their job as agents of the United States to kill the Indian because they wanted to know more about the Indians. And there was a point at one of our national general assemblies where we actually invited a representative of the Sioux Nation and the Utes to come, and the president of the association apologized to the nation and said, we're really sorry for what we did. And he said, you did such a bad job, you really don't have that much to apologize. The Sioux Nation responded that way. He said, you tried your best. We understand. We forgive you. It was a funny, beautiful, poignant moment. By the 1920s, the Bureau of Indian Affairs had changed its opinion about boarding schools, responding to complaints that they were still too expensive and were really encouraging more dependency than self-sufficiency. By 1923, the majority of Indian children nationwide were attending more public schools, but they were very limited in their resources. A report on Indian education issued in 1928 revealed glaring deficiencies in the schools, including poor diet, overcrowding, undercare in terms of medicine, excessive labor by the students, substandard teaching across the board. 1930s witnessed many changes in the policy, but the goal, the idea, was to eliminate the nations, to terminate them, to end them. The policy of the U.S. continued from the 40s until the 1960s, when the American Indian movement rose up and the voice of the Native peoples, of the First Nations, started to be heard clearly, saying, you have not done enough, and all that you did was wrong. Remember when Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell when I was living in Colorado, first Native American to become a U.S. senator in this country. He was a senator from 93 to 2005, and he was a member of the Northern Cheyenne Nation. He said of assimilation and termination in a speech delivered in Montana in 2007, if you can't change them, absorb them until they simply disappear into mainstream culture. That was the goal of America. In Washington's infinite wisdom, he said, it was decided that tribes should no longer be tribes, never mind that they had been tribes for thousands of years. So we are still seeking justice. And we know that it has come into the world. We know that its seeds have been watered, but it is a long time to go, and there are winters to come. One of the most striking things that I learned when I was when I lived in Olympia, and I was getting to meet the Nisqually, and got to learn about Billy Frank Jr., all those Nisqually people and the fish wars. One of the striking things I learned was that, and I'm saying this because a couple of weeks ago I had mentioned Richard Nixon, right? They told me that Richard Nixon did more for the Native Americans than almost any other US president, because he eliminated and cut back so much and he really actually created policies that gave them power and decision-making within their own communities, stopped trying to manage Native American communities and gave them their own power. They have a long ways to go where they can use that power effectively and well for health and wholeness. That was Richard Nixon, of all people. As we go into the next 4 years, we wonder what injustices will be created, attempted to be created, but also what new possibilities for justice may come. Today, we are taking an offering. It's one of the things that we do, not just to serve each other in this small, loving community, but in the larger world. And to talk about that a little bit more, I'm inviting Rhonnie up.
So once a month, we have a Share the Plate offering, as you all know, and it is part of our ancient element of worship. Today, I'm going to ask Bill Swenson to come up, and he will introduce our speaker. The recipient of our Share the Plate this month is IRRF, Indigenous Rights and Reparation Fund. Is that right? Roots and Reparation, I'm sorry. I knew I would get it wrong. So Bill, if you'd like to come up, and he was going to speak a little bit and then introduce our speaker.
So hi. Today our recipient of Share the Plate is the Indigenous Roots and Reparation Foundation. And our guest is Mary Big Bull Lewis, who is the founder and I believe acting executive director, correct? Mary founded IRRF, we sometimes say, in 2021, and our own Steve Clem was sort of helpful in setting that up with her. In addition to being an activist, Mary is also an artist and an entrepreneur. She co-owns 2 small businesses here in Wenatchee, the Evergreen Gift Shop and our Digital Design. I don't want to take up too much time here, but I just do want to say I'm going to try to keep the Zoom session open. After Mary will come up here and speak for a few minutes now, and then from noon to 1 we'll set up the chairs in a circle and have a forum, I guess we call it, or just sort of question and answer where we can all get to know each other and learn a bit more about what's going on. And I will try to keep the Zoom meeting open for that, cross your fingers. Okay, well, without further ado, it's my honor to introduce Mary Big Bull Lewis.
Good morning, Tilla, Stoki, Ishtikanchut, Niraniku. Hello, my name is Mary Big Bull Lewis. I'm an enrolled member of the Colville Confederated Tribes of the Wenatchee, Moses, and Inuit bands, and a descendant of the Blackfoot tribe. I was born and raised here in the Wenatchee Valley. My family are survivors of residential schools and assimilation and colonization. And I grew up not having a lot of that connection until I was well into my adulthood. So IRF was created so that our youth, our next 7 generations, have a cultural connection. And so I'm really thankful for the support from you all and this organization that you've given to us throughout the years. And especially grateful for Steve Clem for his friendship and his services that he's helped with IRF. An easy way to remember is every day is Earth Day. So this year, the CUUF has donated $4,207 to Earth. Thank you, Lamp, for that. These funds go to our general funds unless they're specified for a particular program. This year, we have been very fortunate to move into a permanent private office in downtown Wenatchee at the Mercantile. We've been able to hire an executive director. We've learned trials and tribulations through employing people. As Bill had mentioned, that I am the founder and the interim executive director of IRF. It feels really good to be in this position and to drive this mission forward with our main goal is Land Back, is to have a community space for all Indigenous peoples to gather. We don't have that here. We haven't had that here. There's no place for us to practice our ceremonies or traditions or language. You know, we have to rent out places or do things. And so we should have that here on our homelands. And so that's something that I'm really passionate about and want to see come to fruition. And I think that 2025 is going to be a really good year. So I'm excited for what's to come next and hope that you all can stay today and we can chat more. I brought some inaugural reports that we completed that show our programs and different things. So yeah, I hope that I get to meet you all after. I see some friendly faces that I recognize out here, so it's good to see you all. So Lamp, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Our offering is an ancient element of worship. No matter the amount, giving is a spiritual practice, expressing our thankfulness and generosity regardless of the amount. We live these values in abundance. If you are writing a check and you wish it to go to Share the Plate, please make your check out to CUUF, but write in the memo line, Share the Plate or Earth. Any undesignated cash will also go to Share the Plate. Thank you. Your generosity blesses us. May your gifts make a difference in our communities through the ministries of this church. Thank you. And now you can rise in body and spirit and sing our last song, number 237, The First Noel.
The old Universalists used to say the correct pronunciation of Noel is no hell. As we go from this place, may we work to be diverse, part of a diverse, multicultural, beloved community where everyone thrives. May we covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. May we support using democratic processes to make decisions within the community of all human beings. So may it be.
Please join us in the chalice extinguishing words that are printed in the bulletin or on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and embody in our lives until we are together again. And now we'll form our circle and join hands and sing our closing song.
Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Carry